Well,
in the
think about
home.
it. Yeah, think about it. Think about when you're on the cusp of an argument with your wife or with your kids. There's a cost to that.
Yeah,
And when you go to battle with your wife, with your kids, with anybody in your family, when you do that, there's always a cost. Somebody's going to get hurt.
yeah.
And oftentimes those wounds take a long time to heal.
Welcome, everyone, to our Family Matters podcast, where we talk about family matters because family matters. And today's guest is a friend of mine. His name is Dean Brinkley, and he is an attorney by trade and also owns his own practice. And it's called Brinkley Law Firm here in Beaumont, Texas. Today, won't you help me welcome Dean Brinkley?
Thanks,
What's
Mark.
going on, man?
I'm glad to be here with you today. It's always fun to hang out with you.
Always, man. I'm glad that we were able to finally get
Yeah.
you on the podcast.
Great.
Yes, sir. Well, listen, man. There's a lot of things that we could talk about.
Sure.
But one of the things that I enjoy discussing with you is what you do for a living. It's a very interesting thing because there's a lot of things as far as attorneys that that you guys do, but usually when you're involving families, it's kind of at an interesting time in life.
Yes, it is. One of the big areas of my practice is in probate law. And when you're dealing with probate law, you're dealing with people that have just lost a loved one, and you can imagine it's a low time. They've
Right.
lost a family member, and there's a lot that goes along with that. That's beyond just the grieving process. There's assets that have to be transferred. There's business that has to carry on.
Right.
And so it can be kind of overwhelming. And one of the things I really like about this area of practice is I get to get in there and help these people at these real low times when they're feeling overwhelmed and help them to
Right.
kind of solve their problems and kind of move beyond that moment.
Right.
Just kind of take the load off a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting, man, and it's definitely for sure a ministry in a sense.
It is. You can imagine that when this time comes, you've got many family members, many competing interests, and it's sometimes difficult to navigate all of those competing interests when you're talking about assets and
Yeah.
and properties and
Right.
trying to deal with debts and whatnot. So it's a moment that really lends itself to good ministry opportunities for people.
Absolutely, man. Well, listen, I don't know if you always wanted to be a lawyer, wanted to be attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you get into?
Well, I have to give my wife Margaret credit for a lot of this because when I got out of college, she was still in school, and I was in sales and marketing for many years, and we traveled a lot. We moved around a lot, and bless her heart, she had to go from school to school to school, and finally we ended up in Amarillo, Texas.
Wow.
And she ends up in Canyon at what is now West Texas A&M. And she finishes her degree there, and we're at Bennigan's having dinner one night, and I'm kind of complaining about my job, and she says, well, why don't you go to law school? I'm like, I'm 4 years out of school and everything. I said, I had all kind of objections to it. Well, little did I know, the next day, Margaret goes to the library. You didn't have the phones back then. So she goes to the library and says, okay, here's 6 schools that take people in the spring, and this is where you take the LSAT, and just sort of laid it out for me. And at that point, I thought, well, I guess I have to do it now. But no, the truth is, she knew that I always wanted to be a lawyer, and the primary reason is that I like to help people solve their problems, and I like to kind of bring that to I like to bring that to the table for people in a way that I can use what skills that I have.
Yeah.
I wasn't really meant to be a doctor. A lawyer kind of fit the skill set that I had, and it's lended itself well to doing just that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, man. And I've known you for some time. You definitely do like helping people solve problems.
Sure.
That's just the way you're wired. Is you immediately go to, what can we do to help? That's usually your default saying. What can I do to help?
Yeah.
So, you got into law school. And then eventually you started practicing. Did you?
Yes.
Did you immediately start your own practice, or did you work with somebody?
No,
or?
no. When I started out, I was with a firm, and we were involved in what was the asbestos litigation. And what I saw in that,
Asbestos litigation, is that?
well,
okay.
the people around our area got exposed to asbestos. It was in the refineries and whatnot.
Okay.
And many of them got sick. And so you know, as I was doing that, you are around people at the end of life, and you're starting to see how this is affecting people in that
Yeah.
regard. I also noted that our population was aging pretty rapidly, and that this was going to be a really significant area of need in the future. And so at that point, when I recognized what was coming, I started to get involved in estate planning and probate and elder care, things that I knew were going to be needed for this rapidly aging population.
Right.
And it just kind of started from there. And now I've been practicing for almost 30 years, and the last 20 years of my practice has been primarily in these areas.
Gotcha. So you've started working in this area. You were looking forward to it, and now you eventually started your own practice.
Yeah, well, I mean, what happened is all my partners became judges and retired, you know, so it kind of left me with the kind of on my own, so to speak.
Right.
Now, you know, that's not completely true, because in the office that I'm at, there are other lawyers there. I work with a lot of other fantastic lawyers.
Yeah.
We just the way we organize ourselves is not in a traditional firm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it looks like now. In my practice areas, it ranges a little bit, but a large part of my practice is in the area of probate, and I'm dealing with families that are in an uncontested situation, which means that nobody's arguing, nobody's fighting. We're just trying to administer this estate. And then in some cases, unfortunately, it becomes contested in a variety of different ways. And when that happens, you know, we have to get involved and try to bring some peace to the situation, try to bring some finality to it.
Right. Well, so let's talk about that a little bit, because that's got to be interesting. You know, it's you know, people who in an everyday life, you know, come to a point where everybody wants a piece of the pie, and it can get a little ugly at times, as you were mentioning.
Yes.
And for you, you know, this is really your job, but I'm sure you've seen some really interesting, not so interesting, some pretty nasty
Yeah.
things that have happened. And you know, every family. I don't know that we all imagine that's in us.
Right.
But
Right.
a lot of times, moments like that can bring it out.
It does.
Yeah,
You're right. You can have families that rock along for years, for decades, and there's really no issues like this. And then when oftentimes the patriarch and the matriarch die off, you know, the glue sort of
Yeah.
the family, you start to see fractures and division. And a lot of it is, I don't think people really appreciate the value of the relationships they have with their family.
Right.
And sometimes they have what they think are good reason. You know, you've got family members that are sort of ne'er-do-wells, so to speak. They haven't been good family members. We have this term called the black sheep. They say everybody's got a black sheep in their family,
Right.
you know. Well, you have there's a variety of reasons why it seems to unravel and fall apart. And so I think I maybe take a little different approach to these situations because of my Christian beliefs. I'm interested in trying everything I can to not only preserve the family, but to restore the family.
Yeah.
And in my practice, sometimes, you know, it gets adversarial and there's not much you can do about it. The other side won't reciprocate when you make overtures to try to collaborate and resolve. But my first instinct is to have my clients try to handle it in a way that the other parties feel like they're not being left out, where the other parties feel like their interests are being protected. And a lot of that has to do with transparency. And Marcus, years ago, I underwent some training. I got certified in something called collaborative law. Are you familiar with collaborative law?
I'm not.
Well, collaborative law is an approach to the law that's different than the traditional adversarial approach. It's more fitting kind of with our Christian beliefs, where I'm not just out for myself and I'm keeping you at a distance. We're coming to the table together and we're trying to solve problems that give us both a win, so to speak.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I have to be able to stand in your shoes and try to understand where you're coming from, and you have to stand in my shoes and figure out where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And we have to try to craft a solution that best fits both of our needs and desires.
Yeah.
And that's sort of just a general way of talking about it. There's more complexity to it in the way that it kind of works out. But
Yeah.
it's a good to me it's a good way to look at the kinds of issues that families address. To me it's the best way to preserve the family while dealing with these
Yeah.
tough issues that we have to deal with.
That's a really good principle, and it actually comes from the win-win principle, which is helping both sides to win. And people use it in business. It can be used in leadership.
Sure.
But it also could and should be used in family.
Yeah.
At times we tend to save our best face, in the professional world, in our career, whenever we're working with other people outside the home. But when we get in the home, we tend to relax and be more of
Yeah.
ourselves. Unfortunately, at times, that's where we get a lot of that contention at home, because that win-win principle, I believe, is what you're saying that
Yeah.
you help families deal with. It's something that we can use with our own spouse,
Yeah.
that we can use with our children.
Right.
At times, that the idea of this is my house, my rules, and you're going to follow it
Yeah.
is one of the, nobody likes being talked to that way.
Right.
A friend, we don't like our boss to talk to that, and our children, they are the same. They're individuals.
Right.
And eventually there's only so much that somebody can take of that. But the idea of a win-win principle is something that could be and should be applied in family.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're taught in the Bible a way that we are to love our spouses. I go back to Ephesians and I look at what Paul said when he gave the house rules, and he was talking about wives and husbands. And, one of the things that he tells us to do is to love our wives like Christ loved the church. And it makes me think about the extrapolation of that principle across the board to all the people that we come in contact with, to try to love them the way that Christ loves us.
Yeah.
I'm always marvel at Jesus on the cross when he's praying to the Father for the people that are persecuting and killing him. And he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do."
Right.
How can he love so strongly and just and so with such direct, kind of, I don't know what the word is, but to look through all that and to still love. And so with family, I want people to feel that way about their family.
Yeah.
For me personally, if the wealth that I was going to inherit was going to impact the relationship I had with my brother and sister, I would probably be willing just to give it up to preserve the relationship.
Right.
The good news for me is my brother and sister, they're the same way. We have been brought up that way. And maybe that's why it's easier for me to kind of see things through these lenses. And frankly, Marcus, it's not easy. When we're dealing with people, there's issues that pop up that you have to overcome when we're trying to incorporate these principles. One of them is pride.
Yeah.
They don't want to be wrong about something. Some of it is I'm in power, I've got all the power, and there's some retribution. For years, Mom, you were Mom's favorite, and now I'm in charge. And so a lot of times what we have to do in the process of doing this work is try to figure out what the root issue is with this family. Unfortunately, sometimes it's greed. Sometimes the person just values the things that they're going to get more than they value their family. And that's when it becomes almost impossible to collaborate. And then that's when we just put our gloves on and go to battle, and that's just something that you have to do sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And it's not what I want for these families. Just like God doesn't want us, battling each other. He would prefer that we, lived in harmony. But it's just the practice. It's the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, I love what you said about pride, because that is something that, especially in a marriage,
Yeah.
man, we just want to you want to win the argument.
Yeah.
You want to win the moment. You want to be the person that's on top. You want to be right.
Yeah.
And that we wouldn't call it pride in that moment. We like to call it I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is so true, and in that arena, if we could take a step back and realize, is it really worth me winning this argument? Is it really just about this moment? Is it really that important, or can I humble myself to realize that maybe maybe they are right, and even if they aren't right,
maybe it's best.
Another principle that I'm hearing you talk about is the principle of listening to understand rather than just to be understood.
Correct.
Sometimes when we're talking and we're listening, we're not really listening. We're just waiting for an opportunity for this, just to say what's on my mind.
Yes.
And that happens not just only in marriage, also in parenting. We're not listening to the other side, but there is a not just a principle, but even a skill in learning to really listen. Because if not, we're eventually headed for a lawyer. In a case, unfortunately. But man, what are some things that we can that we can offer, that we can do to help ourselves, to keep from getting to those contentious and divisive moments in life?
Marcus, I have to answer that question different for different people. When my Christian friends come to see me and they ask me that question, the first thing I do is I tell them, look, we've got to go to prayer. Let's go to the Lord and ask Him to guide us and direct us in this regard.
Yeah.
And we take a little time to let that sit in, let that sit in. And oftentimes the Holy Spirit will work on people and they will come to the realization that, man, this wasn't as important as I thought.
Right. I'm
going to, and then they capitulate on something, or they get clarity on what their, direction with things go.
Yeah.
With non-Christians, they don't have that basis, of listening to the Holy Spirit. And so I have to kind of approach them a little differently. I have to try to convince them that the way I'm trying to navigate them is best for them, that there's a benefit to it for them. Oftentimes, it's not going to cost you as much money. Legal work is expensive and it's time consuming, and it's and oftentimes when we're looking at an estate, say it's got $500,000 in it, and everybody wants to go to battle, and they're on their horseback and they've got their sword and they've got their shield and they are ready to go.
Yeah.
And then I have to explain to them, okay, well, this is what it's going to cost you to do that. This is what's going to cost you in time. This is what's going to cost you in money to do that.
Right.
Are you still ready to go to battle? Because if not, I hear some other options that we have. We can go to mediation. We can have an informal settlement conference and let everybody come and air it out. We can enter into other avenues to try to resolve this. So with them, I'm trying to help them do a cost-benefit analysis on what it's going to cost them. And the same thing is true for us Christians. I mean, obviously we don't all live it out perfectly. We're not all listening to the Holy Spirit. And so sometimes they have to make the same decision. There's this a lot of, when I deal with people, they are either operating on economics or they're operating on principle, and principle is expensive. And so I try to help them understand that you may be right and you may not owe them a thing, but it's going to cost you one way or the other. And so we try to do that analysis for them.
That's interesting how that because what I'm hearing you say both applies in your practice, but it sounds like some of those things also apply in just family.
They do.
Before you even get to the table where you're sitting down with an attorney or with a lawyer, that same thing applies in the arena of family as well.
Well, think about it. Yeah, think about it. Think about when you're on the cusp of an argument with your wife or with your kids. There's a cost to that.
Yeah.
And when you go to battle with your wife, with your kids, with anybody in your family, when you do that, there's always a cost. Somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those wounds take a long time to heal. And so whenever you, in a family situation, are in one of those heated moments, whether it's in the realm of that I'm involved in or just in the realm of family, you have to, they used to tell you, count to 3 before you say anything, okay? Well, my thing is, you need to count as long as you need to until you understand what the cost is going to be when you engage in this battle.
Right.
Because you don't have to go to battle with your family. You can collaborate. Whenever when I'm doing weddings for young people and we're talking about getting ready to be married, one of the things I always ask them is like, well, how do y'all communicate? I try to find out about their communication. How do y'all talk when you battle? Do you go from 1 to 10 and everybody yells and screams and you hug it out, or is it a gradual slow burn until somebody says something they shouldn't and then you part ways, or do you communicate and try to hear each other? Kind of what you were saying. I'm listening. I'm actively listening to what you're saying because I'm trying to find a solution.
You're right.
One of the things that I'm really thinking about a lot right now is that scripture in the Bible where we're told that marriage is a mystery, where God knits the man and the wife together as one. And so when you go into marriage, for instance, no longer is it me and you, it's kind of us. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so what I'm doing to you, in a sense, I'm kind of doing to myself. And I'm trying to understand that, but I don't know that I have a full grasp of it. But I know that God has spiritually knit us together, my wife and I. And so whenever I approach arguments with her now, or when I approach things with her now, I try to think about that. Like, this is not only affecting her individually, but this is affecting us as a couple,
as a unit. Yeah, that's a really good point. You said something there that I just want to pop on.
Mm-hmm.
In a moment, in a heated moment, in a divisive moment, in an argument, a contentious moment, it's hard to take a step back and think about what is most important.
Right.
Because in that moment, you want to go to battle. You're not in the mindset to be able to think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important, which goes to show how important it is to know what our principles and what our values are going in.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, as you mentioned, that there always is a cost when you go to battle, and we shouldn't have to battle our family and with arguments and those are going to happen. But that cycle, somebody's got to take a step back and realize what is more valuable for me to win the argument, or is it my marriage? Is it the relationship with my child, or the relationship with my brother, with my mother? And at the end of our life, and we look at the things that we're glad, the things that we're happy for, and then the things that we regret. I don't think it's going to be the time that we spent with our family. I don't think we're going to regret having to take off of work to do those things, or I think the things that we're going to regret the most are the relationships.
Sure.
The relationships, the bridges that got burned.
Yeah.
And it's because it went directly against our values and our principles. And so I hear you, man. And I'm so glad that you're bringing that up. And so if you can end this, if you can wrap this up with a bow, with something just to encourage, or even just something to give families who are watching today, something that we all can take away as far as how to approach moments before they get to moments of contention. What are if you can give us one thing, what would it be?
Sure. Family is valuable. It is really, literally one of the most valuable things that you have.
Yeah.
And all of the things that we talk about in probate law, the assets and whatnot, those burn up. Those get used up. They're gone.
Yeah.
But what's enduring are your relationship with your family.
Right.
And so I would just wish, and I would encourage everybody to, take an account of how valuable it is to have family.
Yeah.
And to treat them the way that you would want to be treated in the situation when it arises, like in a probate situation. Mm-hmm. If you do that, if you're transparent, if you look out after everybody's best interest and do what's fair and what's right, you don't have to worry whether you go to trial or whether you settle up with your family. That's what I would encourage them to do, is just do what's right. Don't let pride get in the way. Don't let your own self-interest to get in the way of what of how you treat the people in your family in these rough situations.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And of course, I would just tell them, like we always tell them, is if you don't know Jesus, you need to know Him. Because that is the most successful thing that you'll do in your family relationships, is to get Him involved, get Him
Absolutely.
right in the middle of it.
Absolutely, man. Listen, Dean, thank you again for being on the podcast. I appreciate you, man. I really enjoyed it.
Same here, Marcus.
And my hope is that you also enjoyed our podcast today. And if you would like to find more episodes from the Family Matters podcast, then you can go to Family Matters Podcast on YouTube, or you can also search Family Matters Podcast on any podcast platform. Thanks again for watching, and remember that your family matters. God bless you.